Welcome to Bamadzajik Inonindwa. This podcast is produced by the Communications Department at the Anishinabek Nation. We will be focusing on the issues and initiatives in Anishinabek Nation territory. I'm your host, Lisa Abel. This is part 2 of our series called Finding Percy. Some of the content of this episode may be upsetting to some listeners. We will be discussing residential schools and missing children and unmarked burials. If you need support, please take the space you need and approach someone you trust. You can access the Hope for Wellness helpline at 1-855-242-3310 or by online chat at hopeforwellness.ca. This service is available 24/7 to all Indigenous people across Canada. Percy Onabigon was an Anishinaabe boy from Long Lake 58 First Nation. In 1946, at 8 years old, he was taken, along with 3 siblings, to St. Joseph's Indian Residential School in Thunder Bay. Without his family's knowledge or consent, he was transferred to a series of hospitals in southern Ontario and ended up institutionalized for the rest of his life. Percy passed away in 1966 at age 27 after having lived for most of his life without his family, his homelands, his Anishinaabe community, language, culture, and spirituality. He was buried in Woodstock, 1,200 kilometers away. His family never forgot about him. In part 1, we heard how Percy's niece, Claire Onabigon, promised her mother that she would find Percy and bring him home. Her efforts spanned nearly 30 years. Claire located Percy's gravesite in Woodstock, but there were no resources available to return him to Long Lake 58. The 2015 Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action highlighted the need to address missing children and unmarked burials and remove barriers to accessing archival information about residential schools. And when the Canadian public learned about the existence of potential burial sites at a former residential school in Kamloops in 2021, the federal government was compelled to develop a federal legal framework to ensure the respectful and culturally appropriate treatment and protection of these unmarked graves and burial sites. In 2022, Kimberly Murray was appointed by the federal government as the independent special interlocutor for missing children and unmarked graves and burial sites associated with Indian residential schools. The Anishinabek Nation began to support our lead communities conducting site searches and assisting with the repatriation of children's remains. Claire Onabigon connected with Kelsey Anger, who is now the director of the Anishinabek Nation's Reconciliation Department. Through archival research, Kelsey and Claire were able to trace Percy's journey from St. Joseph's Residential School in Thunder Bay to institutions in southern Ontario. The Onabigon family was upset to learn that Percy was transferred several times between the notorious Ontario Hospital School at Orillia and another facility, the Woodstock Hospital for Epileptics. But other documents proved hard to find. In this episode, we'll hear how Kim Murray and the Coroner of Ontario, Dr. Dirk Heyer, helped to locate the records that filled in the details of Percy's life and death. There were still a few more hurdles to clear before the family finally secured the funding to welcome Percy Onabigon back home to Long Lake 58 in September 2025. Kelsey and Claire learned many lessons throughout this repatriation process that they hope will help other families seeking their long-lost relatives. They acknowledge that many people and organizations lent their support. Let's return to Kelsey's search for Percy's residential school and hospital records. We start out that Claire knew that Percy was buried at Woodstock. Then you're able to trace what happened to him in the meantime between leaving residential school at Fort William, Thunder Bay, and then going down south, and then him passing away. So you kind of figured out where he was during his lifetime.
For the most part of it, there was still that gap of residential school, the hospital. They said like the dates didn't exactly. So there's a couple days unaccounted for, kind of, where he gets hospitalized, and we realize he's hospitalized in Thunder Bay and then transferred. But that was something I figured out eventually. But it was also, Claire didn't have information about him at residential school either. She has a story or an experience of contacting the mother house that's responsible for those records. This was before the settlement agreement. And they said, yeah, we have lots of stuff. If you're ever around here, come look. Before I was connecting with Claire, I also reached out to them and just happened to be engaging, asking about them providing records. And they said, no, everything's been given to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. You have to go through the National Center of Truth and Reconciliation. They said they can't give them out. So again, the struggle of our legislation not covering ecclesiastic records, religious records, they're not in the archives. So there's a lot of discretion there. And this is when I was able to get support from Kim Murray, the Office of the Special Interlocutor on Missing Children Unmarked Burials. She had the mandate to develop recommendations for the government, but she was also helping families along the way. And then I also connected with Dr. DeCoyer, the coroner's office, and he created the residential school death investigation team and created dedicated folks that work under the coroner's authority to help communities in Ontario find their missing children. And as far as I know, he's the only coroner across the country that did that, created a dedicated team to do this work. And with their help, we were able to get a copy of the register for St. Joe's Residential School. So that's the residential school in Thunder Bay. Claire had never seen Percy's admission. And this was kind of that missing piece that we needed to verify. Percy is number 870, Percy Onabigon. So his name's not even starting with O, Onabigon, it starts with an N, which again creates complexities and issues. It says he's admitted for the first time at 8 years old. He's a male. He's discharged November 7th, 1946. And then there's a little note at the side that says taken to McKellar Hospital. So again, a little bit more research. McKellar Hospital's in Thunder Bay. And that starts to fill in those dates that were kind of missing, like when he's first admitted to a hospital, but he's discharged November 7th. Like, okay, so there's a couple days not accounted for. How long was he in this hospital? Who authorized that? And the horror of these records, which I spend most of my day looking at, is seeing entire families together. And you can see the aunts and uncles that Claire remembers all being admitted the same day with Percy. All of them are readmissions, though. So Percy goes for the first time. All of his other siblings had been there the year before. This is Percy's first time at the residential school. And so that, again, confirms this family story of the kids all went together. They came back on break or whatever it was, and they said, Percy's taken from the school. He's not at the hospital anymore. And that was kind of where my civilian abilities ended. So with the coroner's office, they were able to access documents at the National Center of Truth and Reconciliation. Kim Murray was able to summarize the content, share that with me, and give me the reference numbers. So then Claire can request those. And essentially those fill in the missing part of those days. And we find the letter that says that he's been taken to McKellar's Hospital. And then it's recommended that him and another boy go to Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto. And then there's a notice back that Sick Kids is full, so they're sending him to a hospital outside Toronto. Those dates now line up with the Aurelia Hospital. And ultimately with that, it filled in the details of Percy's journey. So we now knew that, 1946, September 3rd, he gets admitted to the school. November 7th, he's discharged to McKellar Hospital. And then on the 27th of November, there's the Indian agent letters that approve the transfer of the two students. And we see him admitted November 29th. So that makes sense with the travel of 27th to the 29th. He's suddenly at a really hospital. And then 1949, July 8th, is his first admission to Woodstock. So he spends over a year at Aurelia, and this is where he's first noted as having TB, tuberculosis. And then 1950, May 1st, he goes back to OHS Aurelia. 1951, June 26th, Percy goes back to Woodstock. And then in 1966, May 1st, he passes away of tuberculosis. And he contracted tuberculosis at some time. He didn't have it when he left. He didn't have it in the residential school, but he gets TB at some time while he's institutionalized. And that's when his first transfer to Woodstock takes place. And then he's in and out because of TB. And ultimately, the cause of death that we were able to find was TB, as it noted in the register of admissions discharges. There's just a separate column of deaths, and they just changed the number of patients that are in their care. It just drops down by one beside Percy on the day that he dies, and there's a little note of TB. It's horrifying to see people treated that way. And Claire this past year was actually able to go to the archives and physically see that admission book, knowing that someone stood beside Percy and wrote his name down. It was that, that almost tangible connection that she could finally see his name written in those books. She could see when he dies. She could finally see that stuff.
The Onabigon family was surprised to learn that Percy had contracted tuberculosis. Percy was a person with epilepsy, but Claire Onabigon said that the family thought he was well when he was taken away to residential school with his siblings. They were also saddened to discover that once Percy became an adult, external parties continued to make decisions for him.
I thought he died from an epileptic seizure, but he actually died from TB. There were people in our community who had epilepsy, and they were grown up. They were adults, and they lived amongst us, and we saw them all the time. But when they died, it was because of a seizure. So I just thought all these years that he died of an epileptic seizure, but he actually died of TB. And the records that Kelsey uncovered show that he did not have TB at 8 years old. So he contracted TB in those institutions. When he was 18, the Indian agent refused that he come home to his family.
Was that he asked to come home, or that when he was 18 he would have been able to be released from the hospital?
Well, at 18, you're an adult, and I imagine his case was reviewed, and he was no longer a child. He could go home, but the Indian agent said no.
So that's the kind of power the Indian agents had at that point of time.
Yeah, in the 50s and 60s, yeah, for sure. Well, it was the Indian agent again that made the decision that he be transferred to the institutions in Southern Ontario from McKellar's Hospital. They definitely didn't talk to my grandparents and ask for their permission.
All these things happened. Percy went to residential school. He was transferred to hospitals down south. He passed away, and this whole time, his parents and his family were not informed either at any point in time.
We think, and this is the part that we can't find records of, so we can just assume that when Percy would have died, there certainly would have been a communication from the hospital to Canada, because we know that they were responsible for those payments. So that would have absolutely happened. The Indian agent likely would have been notified. he likely would have been responsible for communicating that to the family. Did he? We don't know. Did they write a letter and the family didn't get it or they couldn't read it? We don't know that part of it. The other thing that also often happens is the church in the area where someone dies will communicate with the parish where they were baptized. So there's the possibility that that communication happened, but the family story is, and the family experience is that they never knew where he was, and the last experience was him going to residential school, and then one of the kids said when they came back home, Percy got taken to the hospital. We don't know what happened. So I filled in those parts with Claire, and so it filled in all of those dates and details, and the family was now finally able to know, although it doesn't necessarily help them heal in any way, it uncovered a lot of horrific things that they can only now imagine happened to him, and the loneliness he must have felt. But the way they've explained it is now they know, and it's not a mystery, and they feel that they've done it justice, that they could finally lay him to rest.
In 2021, the federal government established the Residential Schools Missing Children Community Support Fund. Claire and Kelsey hoped that this fund could support Percy's repatriation. So that first step of really finding the records, but also confirming that it was Percy who had gone to residential school. I guess in theory at the time, you and the family were working on the assumption that having this proof, that should have been enough for the government to cover the repatriation of Percy back home. But then what happened?
I'd been having conversations with CERNAC, with the federal government, about this specific situation, and all of my conversations, they said, yeah, for sure, this seems like it falls within our mandate. I don't see why not. Do up a proposal with the family. So I do up the proposal. Claire and I work on getting estimates of what, exhumation would cost, transportation, all of these things. Writing up the proposal, the other struggle was that the government doesn't fund community members specifically. So the funding had to go to the community, and then the community they would do the agreement, and then it would have to go to the family. And I started to get not a good feeling because the government kept asking for some other clarifying questions, specifically regarding Percy's age. And then they had a meeting with Claire and I, and it was a day that'll stick with me. But that was when they said, unfortunately, this is not something we're going to fund. There were a variety of reasons, and most of them were around that it had to be part of a larger project for them to fund it with the community. They weren't funding like specific requests like this. Percy was only at the residential school for 25 days or perhaps a little bit longer than that. He spent most of his life at provincial institutions, so should be having these conversations with Ontario. He's not really a child missing from residential school. There were many different, kind of excuses, and it was heartbreaking to sit on that meeting and essentially be told no, especially after I really encouraged Claire that this would be the option. There was so much going on with Canada and accountability happening all over the country, and it was not even a possibility that they would not fund this. And so I went to the province after that, and we had conversations back and forth with Ontario. They said, we think we can find a way to make this happen, but there's a couple bureaucratic barriers of, again, the transfer agreement has to go to community. It can't go to the family. It took longer, and then by the time things were kind of figured out, it was winter again, so it turned into another fiscal year, April 1st. And ultimately what it was decided was that the funds would just flow through Anishinabek Nation. We already had an agreement in place, so it was just...
Just a pause, though. That must have been really devastating. But also, was there a ballpark of how much this really would have cost? Because I'm not sure that people understand what a challenge it would be for a family to do it on their own. Like, what would this have really cost?
So the estimate was around $40,000 roughly. And obviously that's specific to the distance that we're looking at here. He was taken all the way to Southern Ontario. Woodstock Hospital is near London, Ontario, and he would have to go all the way up to Thunder Bay and then 2.5 hours to the community to Long Lake to be buried there. So multiple modes of transportation would have been required, certainly an airplane. And then the costs associated with exhuming, the costs associated with a reburial, if anyone has had the unfortunate experience of arranging a funeral and those types of ceremonies, it is expensive, but it's a barrier. Getting a stone made, all of those things. And then the ceremony costs, ensuring things are done in a good way, that we can have sunrise when we're exhuming, that the family can be there when they start the exhumation process. That was really important. So Ontario did provide the funding. There was a lot of political support. CBC did some really incredible articles and interviews with Claire. And I know our friend Saul Mamakwa spoke about Percy in Parliament. He told Percy's story. And there was many different voices that came together to make sure this happened. And ultimately, like I said, Ontario provided the funding.
Premier Ford's office, or Premier Ford himself, was told about Percy's story, and he met with us, Premier Ford and Minister Rickford, to announce that the province would cover all costs associated with bringing Percy home. So that was in the fall of 2024.
So that's good that finally the provincial government did take responsibility for that, even though Percy was taken away to a residential school, and that was a federal government decision.
And a federal government decision to move him to an institution in Southern Ontario. And then again, a federal government's decision to keep him there when he was 18 years old. So the federal government was totally responsible for all of that. When we were denied that funding from the federal government, I told them, you took him from us and you hid him in institutions. We never did that. We never hid our children. We were not embarrassed of their challenges. That's your way. You took him from us. You need to bring him back. But the federal government never, ever stepped up.
So even until now, you haven't really heard of anyone from the federal government taking any responsibility?
No, none at all. And Patty Haiju was the minister at the time, and I did write to her office, and the response I got was that my request was being sent to another department, but there was never a response.
So I imagine then for other families in other provinces too, they will have to be very persistent.
Yes, they will have to be very persistent because they are going to get passed off to another department because it's not a sure thing, because there's always these bureaucratic policies that are in the way, and those do not bend. That's what I found. Those policies do not bend. They are black and white.
Once the provincial funding was confirmed, there were still a few more steps until Percy could be returned to his home community. To be certain that it was Percy who was buried in Woodstock, the Onabigon family agreed to DNA testing of his remains. They also decided on an autopsy at Ontario's Centre for Forensic Science to confirm his cause of death. Percy Onabigon was disinterred in May 2025 with ceremony and protocols.
The family decided that the May 1st has come up so many times in this that's a significant date, right? So they said this has to be when this takes place. We have to do ceremony. So the family came down, the chief of the community came down. The forensic pathologist was there, standing there. We went through all the process of ensuring it could be exhumed. There's some health and safety considerations, obviously. It's certainly not straightforward. We made sure we had the mental wellness support there, and Claire also wanted to invite the landholders who'd taken care of him up to that point. So they invited Chief of Mississaugas of the Credit, Chief Salt, and the warden of Woodstock. So he came out as well. He was so touched by the story and had never knew that this was part of their history, which it very much is, right? That they are connected to residential schools, and Percy's not the only boy taken here from a residential school. And Sunrise, the elder, who was also a relative of Percy, was able to do that. It was pouring rain all morning. We were able to set a tent up and huddled under there for the ceremony to start it in a good way. The folks from the funeral home were incredible. They stood for the entire time. They stayed for ceremony. The representatives from their various municipalities stayed. We were frozen and cold and wet, and no one complained. They recognized why we were all there. And the rain lets up after ceremony, and the folks for the cemetery that start the exhumation process, they were there and they were very respectful the entire time. They made sure they were doing everything correctly, everything respectfully. They knew that the family was watching, and the family wanted to be there the whole time. Yeah, so Percy was exhumed, and it was a really emotional moment, getting him back out of the ground and taken away on a gurney. The forensic pathologist there from the visual inspection was able to say, kind of verify that we think this is who we're looking for. That was a really tough experience, but the family, Claire especially, they're so brave and so tireless in this search, and she wanted to be there with him. His remains, they saw, and they knew the family was there. The OPP from up in Thunder Bay, Geraldton area, came down also. They had their Every Child Matters vehicle, the orange cruiser, at Claire's request, and they gave Percy an escort from the cemetery to the coroner's office. So he had the sirens and the lights in the orange vehicle, finally just being recognized as who he is, and not have someone just mix his name up, spell it wrong. Like, there's care. There are 25 people there that all cared enough to give him his name back and his dignity. I don't know if I mentioned, but they have incorporated the requests of the family and the protocols, and Percy traveled with a bundle his entire time. Anishinabek Nation gave him little orange moccasins, and those stayed with him, and he had photos of his family members and his relatives, and the coroner himself said, I will make sure that these stay with him his entire journey, and these are buried with him. And so they confirmed with us that when he was having his autopsy, he had his bundle with him. He had his medicine, and we can believe now he knew he wasn't alone, whereas he had spent from 1966 until 2025 buried without ceremony, buried without the medicines, buried in a foreign place, and now suddenly he's hearing the language and smelling the medicines and being around his family members and all of those things. And it's adaptations to protocols that do exist that make the difference. Because if we haven't already adapted our policies and protocols, at least knowing that we have government entities that are willing to bend the rules a bit and accept that there are cultural nuances that maybe they don't understand, but these have to happen. And that's what we can only hope for every other province, for other people going through a similar situation, until eventually it isn't policy and it isn't procedure.
So finally, Percy was exhumed, and then he was brought for the forensic examination, the DNA testing, and then he was finally brought home. So it's a lot of people work together to make that step happen.
So Percy is home. He was brought home on September 25th, and we had a ceremony and a wake service in the community. He was brought back to Long Lake 58, his home. After 60 years, he was finally home. And we celebrated his life. We celebrated him. There were many pictures of his family. We were all there, all his nieces and nephews. He still has a couple cousins who were there. He had a friend, Jocelyn Bananish, who remembers him. She remembers playing with him. And she said, just all of a sudden he was gone. And she didn't understand that. She was the same age as him. So it was good to be there together for Percy. And then we buried him beside his sisters on September 26th. We buried him. It was a good day for us.
How does it feel now to have Percy back home, back with his family and community?
It feels good. And sometimes I forget that he's home. For a good part of my life, bringing Percy home was something that was so important to me. And it took a long time. So that's why sometimes I forget he's home. But I have his memorial card and his pictures to remind me he's here and that work is done. And I imagine he's happy too. And I imagine my mom is happy.
You kept that promise to her, even though it took that long. Percy finally came back in September. So now, over this period of time, you've had time to reflect on it and process the feelings. Like, why overall do you think it was so important to have done this, to have brought Percy home?
When I think about the journey to bring Percy home, of course, I think about the people who helped. But it's important for us as a family because he was lost to us for over 60 years. And family is so important to us. And bringing them together was the obvious thing to do for them. It was important, like I said earlier, for my grandparents, my great-grandparents, my aunties and my uncles. But for us too, as all the nieces and nephews, and our children and our grandchildren. But it's also important that no one forgets. It's important for our family never to forget because this talks about the resilience of my mom, my aunties, my uncles, my grandparents. It talks about all the hardships they had to endure so that they could give us the life that we have today. The story of love is so important for our family. Knowing that Percy was loved so much is what's important here. Like all families, we have our ups and downs and our struggles. We're not immune to any of that. But the love and the genuine careness we have for each other, that's all real. And that's what needs to filter down through all the generations. And that's what Percy's life, his journey is a symbol of. It's a symbol of the love shared between generations in our family.
That's really inspiring because when we think of so many of the children who are missing, they went to residential school and didn't come home. They all have families like that. Families that love and care for them and miss them and remember them and want them back.
Yeah, they do want them back. They need them back. Just like we needed Percy back. All those families need those children back home. It's a good feeling knowing Percy's here. We almost can say we can rest now. Definitely those that have gone before us, they can rest now knowing Percy's home. But also us, my cousins, we can all rest now too because we're part of it. We all brought Percy home.
So that's like an important part of healing as well.
It is. When I said that Donna Chief, she was the first person in this journey to bring Percy home, who helped me feel like I wasn't alone with this. I had my family, of course. There were many people and many organizations that helped us. So the importance of their support was absolutely everything for us. It gave us hope, but it proved that there were people out there who really cared about what happened to Percy, who really wanted to help to bring him home. All these years, it was our story. It was our problem or our situation to fix or to figure out. And that's what it felt like all these years. Kimberly Murray, in her final report, she asked if Percy's story could be part of that report. And this is because of the work that Kelsey did. And then from there, Saul Mamakwa had read the report, and he approached Sarah Law from CBC Thunder Bay, and it just went from there. Sarah contacted the Anishinabek Nation, and then Kelsey spoke to Grand Chief Linda DeBossige, and she gave Kelsey the go-ahead to help our family in every way possible. And then we had the OPP, the Indigenous Policing Bureau, and Brian Frost. And then the coroner's office, Dr. Dirk Heyer was incredible. And the funeral home in Thunder Bay, so gracious. All of that support was so important to us. They made it all possible, but they made it all beautiful for us. It was so respectful. Of course, the mayor of Oxford County, Marcus Ryan, he was there in Woodstock when Uncle Percy was disinterred. But Marcus Ryan, he really took Percy's story and wanted to make the people of Oxford County aware of what happened in their city. So Oxford County did an exhibit on Percy and the residential school system. So they brought Percy's story out there. And the funeral home there, oh my gosh, again, they were so respectful and gracious. So the people that we've met along the way have just been absolutely incredible and so helpful and so caring. People's views are sure different than when the residential school system was established in Canada. Those views are so different now. If the mentality was different, all the different organizations that I spoke of just now that we are so grateful to, if we had these people in those organizations 60 years ago, Percy would have been home with his family. So people's minds have changed. People are more caring and more respectful. And people are learning about the residential school system and everything that it meant to the Anishinaabe.
So I guess that kind of does speak to reconciliation, but also the way that reconciliation is in action.
Yes, definitely that has been proven to us personally. And I hope for other families whose children never returned home that the same respect and graciousness is shown towards them. And I believe it will be. Kimberly Murray, her work was absolutely incredible. I had the honor of meeting her. The report that she made, the realities of the children that didn't make it home, and the recommendations that she made. However, that's yet to be followed through on. Like her recommendations that the government take responsibility, the United Nations rights of the Indigenous peoples, uh, federal and provincial repatriation laws. Those are the next steps. And those are what needs to happen so that it doesn't take as long as it did for us. But there are still many children out there who didn't make it home. And the years are rolling by. None of my aunties or my uncles ever got to see Percy come home. And this is how it is for those children who are still lost out there. Family members are passing on before they actually see their children brought home. It shouldn't take this long. It shouldn't have taken us this long to bring Percy home. Kelsey's working so hard to find others, and she has found others. And I hope it doesn't take them this long. I hope things can be that much more quicker for them because it's happened and maybe we've set a precedent. So I'm hoping that that makes a difference for all the other families who have children that never made it home.
So, are you continuing advocacy work in this area?
Well, Kelsey and I have been asked to speak to different organizations, and we spoke to members of Archives of Ontario, and we talked about how their records are so important to fill in pieces for children who are gone missing. And access to those records needs to be more open because I was not able to get any of those records. Kelsey's office, the coroner's office, they were able to get the records, but I wasn't.
So it really is a gap because you're left to your own devices to try and figure out how to navigate this. And our struggle to find the funding shows that we can push our government for commitments, but we also have to hold them accountable to fulfill those commitments. So it's one thing for them to say, we'll help find the children. But when it comes down to the point of asking, okay, this is how you help, there was the attempts to, at least at the federal level, to get out of it. And it wasn't easy. And it's really not something that any person could figure out on their own. Perhaps now a little bit easier, and Ontario Archives, I can say, have been really incredible with breaking those barriers down that have existed. And knowing what I know now and the people I know now, we could have perhaps done this in an easier way, and maybe, they're adapting their policies to better support Indigenous families searching for loved ones. But it is very much focused around residential schools and having to find those ties to residential schools. And often there are ties, but there's also a lot of children that were just taken to these institutions themselves. They didn't go to the residential school because they visibly had a physical impairment, and they would have been taken right to a facility and locked up, possibly for their entire lives. And did those families ever know? Were they ever able to find out? Were they ever able to communicate or, lay their loved ones to rest? We don't know. And it's a part of the history of residential schools that still needs to be explored and some accountability for. And then the 42 obligations that came out of Kim Murray's mandate, and those ones really haven't been spoken about since her time finished. There's no commitment from Canada as how they're going to implement them. Ultimately, our legislation, especially on the federal level, is lacking. And I hope Claire's resilience and just warrior spirit can inspire other people that it's possible. It's just holding people accountable and not letting them forget, and finding those allies and supports that are definitely out there. And Claire, she's said to me many times that this is just the beginning. There are other Percys, and that's why we're doing this podcast. That's why we've been asked to present places. Their family's just doing such an amazing job of keeping Percy's spirit alive.
So what would you say your advice to other families who are beginning the search or in the middle of the search for their family members and trying to bring them home?
My advice to people who want to bring family members home is to believe that it can be done. Believe that there are people out there who truly care about what's happened to them, and believe that people out there don't have the same mindset that was out there 50 years ago. Never give up hope and just keep trying.
I'm glad it feels that you and your family are getting kind of healing and closure finally from this experience.
Yes, yes, definitely. Yeah, it was a good feeling for sure to bring Percy home. One of the challenges we had was denialism. There are some people out there who, first of all, didn't believe Percy existed, who don't believe the atrocities of the Indian residential school system, who there are people who believe that our family bringing it to the attention of Canada was just a way for us to get attention. But we know the truth. We live the truth. Today, after all these years, since the last Indian residential school closed in 1996, we are still living the truth of that system. The communities here of Long Lake 58 and Ganuguming First Nation are still struggling with the intergeneration fallout of that system, of the 60s scoop. All of it, it's all real. We continue to live it. There's so much work that needs to be done. Sometimes it feels like we're making headway, and then something happens and pushes us back. But one thing we've learned is that we never give up. We just have to keep moving forward.
What were some of these kind of setbacks that you experienced?
I'm talking now about current day and the issues that our communities are dealing with. Addictions, like many First Nations across Canada, is so high. Our parents struggle to be parents. We're losing all our elders and the valuable teachings that they have, the knowledge that they have. So many illnesses, so many early deaths of our people, so much grief, so much loss. I'm trying to think of, I don't want to make it feel like we're destitute.
For sure, these are big challenges.
Yeah,
In every community, there's also the kind of positive energy, the kind of positive things people are doing to surmount these challenges and move forward, like you're saying.
yeah, and for sure. And the people who work in the different programs, they are aware of all of this. So they do what they can to counter all those feelings of hopelessness. But bringing back spirituality, believing that there's hope, and encouraging and supporting all the challenges that we have. And like everything else, you can't give up. You can't give up. We're not destitute. We have to fix this. It's up to us to fix it. Accept the help where and when you can, but essentially it's us who have to fix it.
It must have been really important for the younger generation to see Percy being brought back and seeing the ability of the family and the community to not give up and to really assert yourselves to right this for your family.
Yes, that's right. So bringing Percy back, I talked about as a symbol of love, but it's a symbol again of resilience and never giving up. And that's the other lesson for our children, is to never give up, that you will get there someday. Things don't happen overnight, but persistence will get you there. And just like all the challenges that our communities face, never give up. Persistence will get us there.
Percy Onabigon's story is just one of thousands of stories of children taken away from their families by the residential school system who never returned home. In this episode, we followed the final steps of a decades-long journey, one that began with Claire Onabigon's promise to her mother that she would find Percy and bring him home, long before there was a national conversation about residential schools or a movement towards reconciliation and justice. Percy's journey home is a story of determination, love, and resilience. It also reminds us how difficult this process remains for many families searching for their missing relatives, and how much work still needs to be done to change laws, improve access to records, and uphold the commitments made to Indigenous communities. Claire and Kelsey continued to share their experiences in the hope that other families will find strength, support, and the allies they need to bring their loved ones home. Stories like this can bring up many emotions. If you need support, please reach out to someone you trust. The Hope for Wellness helpline is available 24/7 at 1-855-242-3310 or through online chat at hopeforwellness.ca. Chimigwech to Claire Onabigon for her generosity in sharing her family's story, and to Kelsey Anger for her advocacy and support, and to all who walked alongside the Onabigon family. Percy's story shows the enduring strength of families who refuse to let their loved ones be forgotten, and the power of bringing them home. Chimigwech for listening to Bamadza Jake Ganonindwa. Until next time, Bama P.